As we've seen, work choices has been a huge issue in the media. In your opinion, how important is IR to the everyday punter, particularly, as you said, to the young?
I think it's profoundly important because obviously there's an enormous number of people out there who have a direct interest in the issue. That is to say, they are salary earners, wage slaves, and the arrangements under which they're employed directly affect them, and they're very, very familiar with them. They can go into the minutiae of penalty rates and the like very, very quickly. But the second issue is that even those people who are very confident about their personal circumstances, their own relationship with the boss, whatever it might be, still are anxious about what's happening to others and what's happening in the general society. So I think it's a two-tier issue for the Conservatives. People who are directly affected, people who are more anxious about the general effect on the community and the future of their children.
Let's turn to property and home ownership. In your opinion, will it be an issue in the election, and how important, again, will it be for voters?
I think it's a very important issue intrinsically in Australia, and one of the key characteristics of marginal seats across the country, state and federal level, and this is a long-lasting attribute, is mortgagees and people who buying their first house have large mortgages and so forth. So it's a quintessentially Australian issue, and it's a very, very pertinent political issue. I think that means both parties will focus on it, and I think that means both parties will try and appeal to that part of the electorate.
In your opinion, tell us why you think the government didn't get a historic big bounce out of the budget, and what does that say about pork barrelling?
I think that's the answer is complex. I think the first issue that dampened the effect of the budget is the sheer cynicism of the electorate. This is a trick the Prime Minister has now pulled on several occasions. On each occasion, I think it has a lessening impact. It increasingly becomes ordinary rather than extraordinary. I think strong budget performances at state and federal levels are now the norm. They don't stand out as perhaps they once did. The Australian public sector at state and federal level is robust, generally speaking, certainly when one compares it to some of our international competitors. And I think the electorate generally are not going to reward people for doing their job well. You know, it's not so much what are you doing for me now, what's the future, what's the vision, what's happening next. You're only as good as your next election, is a saying in our business. The fact that they won their last election and are discharging their responsibilities is not something that's necessarily going to be rewarded automatically with a victory.
We've seen the coalition attack Kevin Rudd, claiming he's in lockstep with the PM and the government. What's your view of that strategy? Is it working?
No, and listen, I think the government's strategy around Kevin Rudd has changed and is changing as they've explored and experimented with different things. They started out trying to blow him out of the water, if you will, with a sort of set of revelations around Brian Burke. The electorate were supremely disinterested in that, and Kevin's composure and poise reassured the electorate that this was a guy who could handle pressure. Since then, they've launched various attacks, whether it be on his wife and her business, and each of these attacks has each successfully failed. And they've failed principally because Kevin has stuck to the message, remained courteous and composed, and I think the Liberal Party's latest effort is basically to say this is a guy who's all spin, no substance. He's not offering an alternative, he's just offering you what we're offering. I'm not sure that's their strategy. I think that's what they're trying this week. And I think the strategy is, the horse has bolted. The electorate are interested in Kevin. Kevin has an alternative message out there. People are listening to it, it's working. There might be key questions where Labor and Liberal do not dramatically disagree. That might cause the Prime Minister frustration. He wishes there was disagreement. But there's plenty enough for us to disagree on. There's climate change, there's national security questions, there's, of course, work choices. There's plenty for us to argue about.
You've touched on work choices, another big talking point which has received huge attention at the election from both sides of politics. Do you actually believe that someone in a marginal seat will actually change their vote because of climate change?
I guess the first thing we need to remember about voters is they're all different, and we might, when we're talking about the electorate, try and create categories, look at demographics, but fundamentally the drivers in every household are different. And it's important we remember that. So in marginal seats, do I think climate change is important? Well, it varies from house to house, suburb to suburb, seat to seat. There are some marginal seats that are regional seats. They're in the middle of a drought. there are some marginal seats, the southeastern corner of Queensland springs to mind, where water has been a long-standing issue, and the water, the stringent water regime presently in place there is obviously a key local issue. These are local manifestations of climate change. People are worried about the changing circumstances of their resources, water, timber, the whole range of things. So yeah, I think it does matter. I think if you go into a seat like Braddon, where the timber industry is so important, I think if you go into parts of Queensland where water is important, Eden Monero, regional places, it changes seat to seat. It's a critical issue because it's an economic issue, it's a security issue, it's an environmental issue, and people get the idea that if we don't handle it now, there's not going to be a tomorrow.
Get your crystal ball out, run us through the next 2 months, obviously a crucial time. Give us an idea of how you think things will play out and what's your role going to be.
Well, the dangerous thing about crystal balls is I guess I could be proven instantly wrong, but I'll have a go. Listen, I think the government are going to want to have some time to live down the Howard Costello dynamic. I think that was very dangerous for them. I think it went to the heart of their message, which is stability, that they want to be a low-risk, devil-you-know alternative, and I think they've done a lot of harm to that message themselves. They'll want some time to live that down. I think the $70 billion spend on advertising is a very, very important part of their political strategy, and they'll want that media buy to have as much time as possible to have an impact on the electorate. I think they'll be hoping that Labor stumbles at some point. So all of those things mean I think the Liberal Party's going for a later date, and as I've said to you, the 8th of December. I think that means that over that time they're going to try and make out the argument that the Labor Party is controlled by unions, that they are a low-risk, experienced team with a transition plan which makes sense, and I think they'll be banking on externalities. Obviously a dangerous position for them to be in, but you know, the oppositions make mistakes, governments sometimes get lucky. Who knows how the political scenario will be transformed by a dramatic international event? Well, of course we don't know. And whether such an event plays for Labor or plays for the Liberals, who knows? So this election is still up for grabs. I think the government aren't going to call it till they think they can win it, and I think they've got 3 months of serious hard work ahead of them.
Finally, as you've said, there's every chance you'll become a senator. Given that, what are the reforms that you think will be important for business across the country?
Gosh, there are lots. Listen, I think work choices is an issue for business as well as it is for Labor, because I think it was very interesting recently watching Spotlight change its industrial arrangements because the sheer complexity of work choices had become an issue for them as a matter of business red tape. I thought that was interesting. I think that's an important lesson for Labor in terms of how it goes forward with that issue. I think the sheer size of the public sector federally at the moment must be an issue that occupies businesses' mind. I remember when Howard first came into office, the public sector shrank, Canberra shrank, property prices in Canberra deteriorated as a result. Property prices are great in Canberra at the moment. The public sector is looking great. So I wonder if that's an issue for business, the sheer weight of regulatory issues. I hope Labor can make a really outstanding contribution on state-federal relations. I don't believe that's rhetoric, as some cynical business leaders may. I think we can make a real difference there in terms of healthcare, the cost shifting, the blame shifting that goes on between tiers of government. That's a window of opportunity I think we really have to handle well. That potentially can save lots of money, can deliver a service a lot more cleanly and effectively to the community, and that will be realised in better tax regimes, better tax rates. And then infrastructure. I think we have a continuing test on infrastructure and the capacity of our economy. It's always a terrific thing, a salutary thing, I think, whenever I go overseas to look at the state of overseas infrastructure. Aussies are always quick to bag their roads and their bridges, as well they may. But we do have a terrific gift of infrastructure in this country. We've got to preserve it and keep it happening. So that means ports, airports, seaports, roads. These things are the arteries of our economy. I think we've got a good advantage there. We need to keep it.
Okay, David Feeney, thanks for your time.
A pleasure. Thank you very much.